If you had just 1 minute to live, what would you do? It's a question that I had never really thought about until I was forced to face it. To be honest, I'd always believed that death was just the end. No afterlife, no great mystery, just darkness. You live, you die, and that's it. End of story. No heavenly light, no reunion with loved ones, no divine intervention. Just silence. But then, I came face to face with the one thing that had always seemed so distant, the truth about life and death. I was lying on the operating table, a cold, sterile room surrounding me. My body was still, my pulse slowing, but I could hear the faint beeping of the heart monitor. The sound was rhythmic, steady, like a ticking clock winding down. My mind, though heavy and clouded, couldn't ignore the sensation, the unmistakable feeling that something wasn't right. A sense of impending doom that hovered over me like a dark cloud, pressing against my chest. The last thing I remembered was the surgical team bustling around me, preparing for the procedure. There was no fear in my heart at first, no panic, just a strange calmness. I had been through surgeries before. I trusted the doctors, trusted that everything would be fine. But that calmness was quickly replaced by a creeping discomfort, a tightness in my chest. Then, it happened. Everything faded. The heart monitor that had been ticking away suddenly fell silent. I felt it, my heart stopped beating. A voice, distant and strained, said, "He's gone." No pulse. Time of death, 7:45 a.m. I don't know how long I had been unconscious before that moment. A few seconds. A few minutes. I wouldn't know until much later, but everything changed in an instant. I could hear muffled voices around me, but there was no pain, no fear. Just a deep, unsettling silence. I wasn't aware of my body anymore. It was as if I had left it behind, drifting away, free from the constraints of flesh and bone. I wasn't scared, I wasn't even sure I knew what was happening. It felt strange. Different. I felt light, weightless. My first instinct was to try to look around, to see where I was. But I couldn't quite make sense of what was in front of me. All I could see was a faint glow, a brilliant, blinding light, unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't like the light of a bright sunny day or the soft glow of a lamp. It was something else entirely, something so pure, so intense, that it felt almost alive. I wasn't sure how I knew it, but I could tell this was the moment where life and death met. The moment I was supposed to step over the line between the two. As I floated there in the ethereal glow, I could feel the weight of my past, the mistakes, the regrets, the good and bad decisions, falling away from me. They didn't matter here. In this space, they had no meaning. But as I looked around, I realized something odd. I wasn't alone. There, in the distance, was a figure. A shadow, perhaps, but I knew, deep down, that this was someone I knew. Someone who had passed long before I had. The warmth of their presence washed over me, and I could feel the familiarity, like a long-lost friend who had been waiting for me all along. My heart ached. I wanted to reach out, to say something, but there was no need for words. The connection was felt deeply, in a way words could never express. I wasn't sure how much time had passed. It felt like hours, yet it was just a blink of an eye. I was suspended. Floating between two worlds, unsure of what to do. A pull, soft yet undeniable, tugged at me. It wasn't the light, though, that seemed welcoming. It was something else, a feeling. It was as though I had to choose, had to make a decision. A voice, calm, gentle, but with an authority that I couldn't ignore, spoke to me. It wasn't out loud, but it filled the space, resonating in my mind, in my very being. "You can stay," the voice said. "Or you can go back. The choice is yours." I felt the weight of those words, but more than that, I felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't a peace that meant everything was perfect, but a peace that simply allowed me to be. To exist. To let go of the burdens of life. But that pull, that feeling, it was strong. And it was attached to something, or someone, that I couldn't ignore. I wasn't alone in this decision. I knew that, even though I couldn't see them clearly, there were people who needed me, people I loved, people who would be affected by my choice. The voice lingered, offering the same choice. Stay, or go. My mind raced. I wanted to stay in this peaceful space, to bask in the tranquility, to embrace the stillness of it all. But something, someone, was calling me back. And I knew, without a doubt, that I had to return. Not because I feared death. No, it wasn't that. It was because I had unfinished business. There were people in my life, people who mattered to me, and I wasn't ready to leave them behind. Not yet. And so, I made my choice. I'll go back, I said, though I'm not sure if I spoke the words out loud or just thought them. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I had made the decision. The pull grew stronger. A rush of energy enveloped me, and I felt myself being pulled away from the light, from the peace I had briefly known. It was a sharp contrast to the serenity I had just experienced. I didn't want to leave. But in that moment, I realized something important. I had been given a second chance. A chance to make things right, to love more deeply, to live with purpose. And just like that, the world I had left behind, the operating room, the doctors, the machines, came rushing back into focus. The beeping of the heart monitor returned, the sterile smell of the room filled my nostrils, and the cold metal of the table beneath me was all too real. I was back. But something had changed. In that moment, I didn't know exactly what had changed, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't the same person I had been just moments ago. I had been to the other side, and now, I was back. And I would never look at life the same way again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The moment I made my choice, the world around me dissolved. It was like slipping out of a dream, or perhaps, the dream slipping out of me. The physical world, the sounds, the sights, the pain, disappeared entirely. Gone. All that was left was this strange, weightless feeling, as if my consciousness was untethered from my body. I didn't have the words to explain it then, but now, I know, I had left my body behind. I had no control over where I was going, but I didn't need it. I didn't feel lost, just guided. The pull was soft, gentle, yet insistent, like a current pulling me up, and I found myself floating higher and higher. At first, I couldn't even see my own body. It wasn't until I turned my attention back to where I had been that I realized the truth. There I was. Lying motionless on the operating table, my chest bare, the hospital gown hanging loosely around me. I could see my body, but I didn't feel it. Not the pain, not the fear. It was as if I was no longer a part of it. For a moment, I was fascinated. Detached. Observing myself as though I was an object, someone I didn't know. My hands were still, and my chest didn't rise and fall with breath. It was clear now, I was gone. But I wasn't afraid. There was a soft, pulsing light in the distance, a warm, inviting glow. I didn't know why I was drawn to it, but I felt an undeniable pull toward it. The light seemed to call me, and I followed it without question. As I drifted closer to the light, I could feel my own body, my essence, my soul, being drawn toward it. The sensation was more comforting than anything I had ever known. There was no harshness, no fear, no anxiety. Only peace. The kind of peace I hadn't experienced in years. As I floated toward the light, I could feel it envelop me. It wasn't blinding, but it was intense, radiating a warmth that seemed to reach deep within me. It was as though the light was alive, breathing, pulsing with energy. I could sense that this was not just any light, but something sacred, something ancient. It wasn't the light of the sun, nor the light from a lamp. It was something more, something divine. I could feel the weight of everything I had experienced in my life, both the joys and the regrets, falling away. They no longer seemed important. They were just memories, distant and faded. They belonged to someone else, not to me anymore. This light, this place, it had nothing to do with time. Time had no meaning here. There was no rush, no hurry. There was just the now. And that now was perfect. I don't know how long I hovered in that space, but it felt timeless. It was as if I had always been here, always existed in this serene, peaceful state. There was no noise, no chaos, just stillness. I couldn't explain it. I didn't need to. I felt no fear, no urgency, no need to understand it. It was as if I was exactly where I was meant to be. But then, I felt something. It wasn't a voice, at least not in the sense I was used to. It wasn't a sound I could hear, but it was something I could feel, deep inside of me. A pull, gentle but firm, tugging at the core of my being. I could sense it wasn't just the light that was calling me. There was something more. Something I couldn't see but could feel, like an unspoken invitation to move forward. It felt like love, unconditional, eternal love. And yet, the feeling was not a command. It was a question. A decision that only I could make. Do you want to stay, or do you want to go back? The words echoed within me, though they were not spoken aloud. They were not even really words at all. It was more like a deep, soul-stirring feeling that reached into every part of my being. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even sad. There was no longing for the life I had left behind. But I realized something. As much as I felt at peace here, there were people in my life who still needed me. My family, my wife, my children, there was unfinished business waiting for me back there. Things I hadn't said, things I hadn't done. Relationships I had left hanging. I couldn't leave them like that. Not yet. I could feel the light pulling me back. It was as if the entire universe was offering me this choice, to stay in this realm of peace and love, or to return to the chaos and imperfections of life. But I knew in that moment, deep in my soul, that I wasn't finished. I was ready to go back. The moment I made my choice, I felt the light's pull soften, almost as if it was acknowledging my decision. There was no anger, no judgment. Just understanding. Compassion. It was as if the light knew I had a purpose to fulfill, and that the time for my journey wasn't yet over. As the light began to fade into the distance, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, toward the light, toward whatever had brought me here, and toward the life that awaited me. But then, as if a door was closing behind me, I felt myself being pulled away from the warmth, from the light. It wasn't painful, but it was a distinct feeling of being separated, drawn out of something so familiar and comforting. The change was sudden. Like being pulled out of a dream, back into the harshness of reality. It was time to go back. I couldn't see where I was going, but I could feel my consciousness being pulled through the darkness. It was as if I was moving through a tunnel, heading towards something unknown. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. I knew that I was being drawn back to life. Back to the world I had left behind. The sense of peace and serenity that had enveloped me so completely began to slip away. The warmth of the light faded, and I felt a deep, almost painful tug at my chest, a sensation like gravity pulling me back into my body. I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to. And then, like a jolt of electricity, I was back. Back to the cold metal table, the sterile operating room, the beep of the heart monitor, the faint sounds of the medical staff talking above me. Back to a body that I no longer recognized, a body that seemed foreign, heavy, and almost unbearable. But I was alive. It wasn't peaceful anymore. There was no soft light. There was no comforting presence. Just pain. And a deep, overwhelming sense of confusion. I was back. But I wasn't the same. The transition from that place, where I had felt untouchable, free from the burdens of life, to the stark, cold reality of the operating room was jarring. It was like being yanked out of a dream and thrust into the harsh light of day. And yet, as my consciousness began to reassemble itself, I felt something stirring deep within me, something I couldn't quite explain. I had returned, but something fundamental had shifted. I could feel it in the very marrow of my bones, a sense that the world I had left behind was now different, unfamiliar, even though it was still the same. The first thing I noticed was the pain. The sharp, unyielding ache that came rushing back, not from the surgery itself, but from the sensation of inhabiting a body once again. I could feel the weight of it, the physicality that I had so briefly escaped. My chest ached where the doctors had worked, and my body felt stiff, as though it had been out of use for far too long. But that was nothing compared to what happened next. As I regained awareness, I became acutely aware of the sounds around me. The beeping of machines. The low murmur of the nurses speaking to one another. But what struck me most, what sent a ripple of unease through my mind, was the complete and utter silence in my own head. I couldn't hear myself think. There was nothing. In the moments that I floated between life and death, I had experienced the most profound sense of peace, like being wrapped in warmth and love, held in the embrace of something that defied all understanding. I could still remember the feeling of it, the perfect stillness, the deep, unspoken connection to everything. And now, as I lay there on the table, I felt disconnected. Alone. As if the part of me that had truly lived in that space, the soul, if you will, was no longer fully present in the body I had returned to. I wanted to scream, to tell the doctors what I had seen, what I had felt, but the words seemed locked away in some faraway corner of my mind. There were no words for it. How could I explain the inexplicable? And then I heard it. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense, there was no one in the room speaking to me, but it was a presence. An overwhelming, powerful presence that filled every inch of the operating room. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. It was like an immense love, so deep and pure, that it almost brought me to tears. The feeling was so strong, so all-encompassing, that it shook me to my very core. You are not alone. The words came, not as an audible sound, but as a knowing, as a presence within me. I didn't have to hear them, I could feel them. They were carved into my very being. I had felt this presence before, I realized. Not in my life, not in any tangible way, but in that light, in that sacred place where I had been just moments ago. It was the same presence. The same warmth. The same love. The presence continued, but now, I understood. I wasn't being told anything. I was simply remembering. Love never dies, the presence seemed to whisper, though it wasn't a voice, more like a gentle pulse, a hum in the back of my mind. You are not lost. You are found. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to shout, to demand answers to the questions that had always plagued me. Was there a life after death? Was there something beyond this? But no words escaped my lips. I couldn't speak, not because I was unable, but because I knew, deep down, that words didn't matter anymore. In that space I had been, there was no need for questions, no need for explanations. There was just being. But as the sensation of the presence began to ebb away, I felt a deep, profound sorrow. Not sorrow for myself, but for the life I had returned to. I had been shown something so beyond the limits of human understanding, that I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret for not staying where I had been. What had I come back to? The world I returned to felt small, contained, bound by the limitations of flesh and time. It felt like a shadow of the brilliance I had witnessed. I wasn't sure how long I lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness, when I became aware of someone else in the room. My wife. Her presence was unmistakable. Though she wasn't speaking, I could feel her there, as though her very being had entered the space, drawn to me in a way that went beyond the physical. James, she whispered, her voice filled with both fear and love. I couldn't open my eyes to look at her yet, but I could hear her clearly, feel her as if she were right beside me. I'm here, love. You're going to be okay. You're going to be alright. I wanted to reach out, to tell her what had happened, but I still couldn't find the words. I wanted to hold her, to tell her that I had seen it, that I had been on the other side. I had touched something that was beyond death, beyond life, beyond everything I had known. But all I could do was lie there, my body heavy with the weight of this unspoken truth. The nurses continued their work around me, moving as if everything were normal, but I knew it wasn't. Not for me. Not anymore. I was no longer the same person who had gone under anesthesia just hours before. I wasn't sure how I knew it, but I knew it with absolute certainty. I had seen the other side. I had touched something eternal, something that transcended time, and I wasn't sure how to come back from that. How could I ever be the same again after what I had experienced? The confusion, the isolation, the longing for the peace I had left behind, it was all overwhelming. And yet, I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt the presence, like a gentle hand resting on my heart, reminding me that I wasn't abandoned, that I wasn't lost. The love I had felt on the other side hadn't gone anywhere. It was still here, inside me, waiting to be acknowledged. Waiting for me to see it for what it was, the one thing that endured beyond all else. And in that moment, I realized that I was not truly alone. Even in my confusion, even in my fear, I was never alone. As I closed my eyes and drifted back into unconsciousness, I knew I had only just begun to understand what had happened to me. I wasn't ready to face it fully yet, but I would. I would find a way to make sense of it. I had to. But for now, there was just the quiet presence of love, lingering, waiting for me to find it again. The first thing I remember after that moment was the sharp sound of the heart monitor. It beeped loudly, an unwelcome reminder that I had returned to the land of the living. My chest felt tight, my body stiff, and everything felt wrong. The clarity I had experienced, the peace, the profound connection I had felt on the other side, was slipping away like sand through my fingers. But the warmth, the love, the presence of something so much greater than myself, remained within me, like a quiet ember glowing in the deepest part of my being. I couldn't explain it to anyone. How could I? How could I tell them that I had been dead, really, truly dead, and had come back from a place so magnificent, so pure, that words couldn't even come close to capturing it? I heard my wife's voice again, softer now. She was by my side, her hand on mine. I could feel her warmth, but it felt distant, almost foreign. The connection I had once felt with her, though it was still there, was now touched by something else, something beyond the physical. I couldn't explain it. I didn't have the words. "James," she whispered, her voice trembling, "can you hear me? Please, can you hear me?" I wanted to respond. I wanted to tell her everything, everything I had experienced, everything I had learned, every beautiful thing I had seen. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't afraid anymore. That death was not something to fear. But I couldn't find the words. I couldn't even speak. I could feel her gaze on me, the desperation in her eyes. I could hear the quiet sobs she was trying to suppress. But I felt strangely detached, as though I were an observer in my own body, unable to truly connect with her in the way I had before. "I'm here," I wanted to say, but my throat felt dry, and my mouth seemed frozen. I could only squeeze her hand slightly in return. The doctors and nurses moved around me, their voices muffled, their actions mechanical. I could see their faces, but they seemed so far away. Everything felt distant. It was like I was looking at the world through a foggy window, unable to truly be a part of it anymore. It was hard to explain. It wasn't like I was numb. I could feel everything, pain, cold, hunger, but the emotional weight of it was somehow less. It felt like I was living in a world that didn't quite match the one I had experienced during my near-death experience. There, I had felt pure peace, like a child in the embrace of a loving parent. There, I had known that everything was connected, that nothing truly ended, that life was just a part of something much larger. Here, though, In the sterile room filled with the scent of antiseptic and the low hum of machines, I felt lost. The peace I had touched was still there, like a faint echo in my soul, but it seemed so far away now. The confusion and disorientation were overwhelming. I wanted to go back to that place, the place where everything made sense, where the light was warm and all-encompassing. I wanted to be free from the weight of a body that felt foreign to me. I wanted to escape the sharp edges of this reality, where everything was so hard and cold. I wasn't sure how much time had passed before the doctors finally began to speak to me directly. One of them, Dr. Harris, I think it was, leaned over me, his face wrinkled with concern. "Mr. James," he said, his voice soft but serious, "you gave us quite a scare there. You had no pulse for over 85 minutes. We didn't know if we'd be able to bring you back." I wanted to respond, to explain that I hadn't truly been gone, at least, not in the way they understood it. I hadn't just been unconscious. I had been somewhere else, somewhere beyond the physical. But the words wouldn't come. My wife's hand was still holding mine, but the warmth of her touch now felt like a distant memory. How could I tell her what had happened when I didn't even know how to fully comprehend it myself? She wasn't just waiting for me to wake up. She was waiting for me to be me again. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. "James?" she asked again, her voice breaking through the haze in my mind. "Do you remember me? Do you remember everything?" I nodded slowly. I remembered her, of course. I remembered everything about her, the way her eyes lit up when she smiled, the sound of her laugh, the way she held me when I was feeling low. I remembered our life together, the moments we shared, the love we had built. But it felt like something had shifted, like I was seeing her through a different lens. I could no longer see her as just my wife, my partner, my love. I saw her as part of something bigger, something that was beyond even the two of us. And in that realization, something broke within me. I wasn't sure how to explain it. How could I? I closed my eyes, trying to push the fog away. Trying to find a way to make sense of everything. I needed to talk to her, needed to tell her what had happened, what I had seen. But I couldn't find the words. How could I explain that I had been to the edge of life and death, and that I had seen a truth that was so profound, so overwhelming, that I wasn't sure how to fit it back into the world we shared? "I'm here," I said finally, my voice hoarse, my throat dry. "I'm here, love." Her grip tightened on my hand, and I could feel her relief. But I knew, deep down, that things wouldn't be the same. Not for me. Not for either of us. I had come back. Yes, I was alive. Yes, I could still hold her hand. But I was different now. And I didn't know how to live in this world again, not after what I had seen. Not after what I had felt. The doctors told me I would need time to recover physically. But the physical recovery wasn't what worried me. It was the emotional and spiritual one that troubled me most. How could I ever go back to being the man I was before? How could I just pick up the pieces of my life and go on as if nothing had changed, when everything had changed, everything within me? My wife continued to speak to me, reassuring me, but the words felt distant. I wasn't sure if I could ever truly return to the life I had left behind. How could I? I had been somewhere else, somewhere beyond time and space, beyond understanding, and now, I had to come back to this. The real question was, could I ever go back to the man I had been before? Could I ever be the same again? I spent the next few days in and out of the hospital. My body was recovering from the trauma of surgery, but my mind was a different story. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself drifting back to that place, to that overwhelming sense of peace and belonging that had surrounded me during my near-death experience. And when I opened my eyes, I was back in this sterile, cold hospital room, a room full of doctors, nurses, and machines that seemed so incongruent with what I had just experienced. I wanted to tell my wife everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. Every time I tried, the words felt empty, like there was no way to convey the depth of what I had seen. What if she didn't understand? What if she thought I was losing my mind? I had already seen the way the doctors looked at me, the skepticism in their eyes when they tried to explain my recovery as a medical miracle. But the truth was, it wasn't a miracle. It was something else, something far more profound than anything they could comprehend. My wife, Marissa, sat by my side every day. She would hold my hand and speak softly to me, her voice filled with concern and love. But I could feel her distance, too. It wasn't physical distance, it was something subtler. She was waiting for me to return to her, to come back to the man I had been before. The man who had shared her life, her dreams, her love. But I wasn't that man anymore. In the days that followed, I found myself becoming increasingly restless. The physical recovery was slow, but it wasn't the pain in my body that I struggled with, it was the sense of disconnect I felt with everything around me. The world I had returned to no longer seemed real. Everything felt shallow and fleeting, as if I was watching it from a distance, unable to truly touch it. I could hear Marissa's voice calling me, but it was as if I were underwater, the words muffled and distant. I tried to tell her that I wasn't the same, that I had seen something that changed me, that I wasn't sure how to come back to this life. But the words wouldn't come. I wanted to share my experience with her, but I didn't know how. "You're going to be okay, James," she would say, trying to comfort me as she ran her fingers through my hair. "We'll get through this together." But I wasn't sure if I could. Not anymore. I felt like a stranger in my own life. I tried to do the things I used to do, sit on the porch and sip my morning coffee, read the newspaper, watch TV, but nothing felt the same. I couldn't focus. I couldn't lose myself in the mundane details of life like I used to. My mind kept drifting back to that place, to the light, to the overwhelming love I had felt there. And when I looked at the world around me, it seemed so small. I would find myself staring out the window for hours, lost in thought, wishing I could go back to that place. The silence of the world around me felt like a constant reminder of the peace I had left behind. I knew that what I had experienced wasn't something I could explain, not to anyone who hadn't been there. How could I make them understand? How could I explain that I had crossed over, that I had touched something eternal and real? Marissa would ask me what was wrong, but every time she did, I found myself withdrawing even further. I didn't know how to tell her what I had seen. I didn't know how to tell her that I was no longer the man she had married. How could I explain that I had seen the other side of death, and that it had shown me something so beautiful, so full of love, that I couldn't bear to return to the life I had known before? "You've been through a lot, James," Marissa said one night, her voice gentle but insistent. "It's going to take time to heal, but I know you're strong. You'll find your way back." But I wasn't sure if I wanted to. How could I go back to the way things were when I had seen the truth? The love, the light, the warmth, it was so much more real than anything in this world. It felt like a lie to go back to this life, to pretend that everything was okay when I knew that there was something far greater waiting for us all. "I'm not the same," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't feel like me anymore." Marissa's eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't say anything. She just held my hand tighter, as if trying to anchor me to this world, to the life we had shared. But no matter how hard she tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind, something I couldn't return to. The days passed in a blur of recovery and confusion. My physical body was healing, but my soul felt like it was drifting. I spent hours staring into the dark, trying to understand what had happened to me, trying to make sense of the experience that had changed everything. But the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. There was one moment, though, that I couldn't shake. It was the moment when I had been given the choice. When I had been asked, "Would you like to stay, or would you like to return?" I had chosen to return, but the truth was, I wasn't sure why. Was it for Marissa? Was it for the life I had left behind? Or had I returned because I was afraid of what it meant to truly let go? The uncertainty gnawed at me. I had made the decision to come back, but I wasn't sure if I had made the right choice. The life I had returned to felt hollow, disconnected from the beauty and love I had seen on the other side. And yet, there was a part of me that knew I wasn't supposed to have all the answers. Not yet. Maybe the purpose of my return wasn't to find answers, but to live with the questions. To find a new way of being, a new way of living with this profound truth I had been given. But for now, all I could do was sit in the quiet of my home, surrounded by the people who loved me, and try to figure out how to live again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks that followed were a blur of routine and chaos. The body, it seems, heals faster than the mind. The physical scars of the surgery faded slowly, but the spiritual scars, the ones I couldn't explain to anyone, the ones that were invisible, lingered like a weight on my chest. Every moment felt like a reminder that I was not the same person who had walked into that operating room, nor was I the same person who had walked out of it. Marissa continued to watch me with that mixture of love and concern. She wanted me to be whole again, to return to the man she had married, but I could tell that she didn't fully understand. How could she? How could anyone understand what it was like to cross that line between life and death and come back? I couldn't explain it to her, and part of me didn't even know how to start. The few times I tried to talk about it, the words felt heavy in my mouth, as if they didn't belong. I would tell her bits and pieces of what had happened, the light, the peace, the love, but every time I did, it felt like I was speaking a foreign language. The words didn't do the experience justice. How could they? One afternoon, as we sat together in the living room, I caught her looking at me with a sadness I couldn't ignore. Her eyes, usually so full of warmth, were clouded with concern. "James," she said softly, "I know you're not the same. But I need you to talk to me. Please. I don't know how to help you if you don't let me in." I looked at her, her face full of worry. How could I let her in when I wasn't even sure what had happened to me? How could I explain that I had seen something beyond this world, something that was so incredibly real, and yet so utterly beyond what our minds could comprehend? How could I tell her that I was afraid of never finding my place in this life again? But her voice, gentle and pleading, broke through my defenses. "I know it's hard," she continued, "but I can't help you if you don't let me. I'm here for you, no matter what." The sincerity in her voice made me want to reach out, to open up, to tell her everything. But the fear of being misunderstood, of being seen as crazy, held me back. I didn't want to lose her, to push her away with something she couldn't possibly understand. I don't know how to explain it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's like everything I thought I knew doesn't matter anymore. It's all so small, so fleeting. I don't know how to live in this world when I've felt something so much bigger." She sat there quietly, her eyes soft and patient, waiting for me to continue. And in that moment, something inside me cracked open. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I saw it, Marissa," I said, my voice trembling now. "I saw the truth. I saw what lies beyond this life. It's so much more beautiful than anything we can understand. I felt the love, the peace, it was like I was part of something greater, something that connected everything, everywhere. And when I came back here, it felt wrong. Like I was trying to fit into a life that's too small for me now." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened, her hand resting gently on mine. "I don't know what to do with it," I continued, feeling the weight of my words. "I don't know how to live here anymore, knowing that there's something so much bigger, something that makes all this," I gestured to the house, to the world around us, "seem insignificant." I paused, letting the silence fill the space between us. I could hear the sound of the clock ticking on the wall, the soft rustle of the trees outside in the breeze. Everything felt still, almost too still. But I could feel Marissa's presence beside me, her quiet strength grounding me, reminding me that I wasn't alone, even if it felt that way. "I don't want to lose you, James," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "But I don't know how to help you if you don't let me in. I can't understand what you went through, but I want to. I want to try." Her words hit me like a wave. I hadn't realized how much I had been pushing her away, how much I had been holding in. It wasn't fair to her. She was right. I needed to let her in, to let her help me, even if it meant admitting that I didn't have all the answers, even if it meant accepting that I was struggling. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice raw. "I'm scared that I'll never find my place again. I'm scared that I'll never feel like I belong in this world after what I've seen." Her grip on my hand tightened, and I could feel her warmth, her steady presence. "You do belong here, James. You do. But you're different now, and that's okay. We'll figure it out, together." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to have everything figured out. Maybe I didn't need to understand it all right away. Maybe the process of healing, of finding my way back to this world, could take time. "I don't know what the future holds," I said slowly, "but I know one thing. I don't want to go through it alone. I want to be with you, even if I'm not sure who I am yet." She smiled, her eyes soft with compassion. "You're still James, the man I love. You're just learning who you are now. And I'll be here, every step of the way." That moment was like a balm to my soul. I realized, then, that maybe I didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe the journey I had gone through, this painful, confusing, yet ultimately transformative experience, wasn't something I had to understand all at once. There would be time. Time to process, time to adjust, time to find my place again. And as I looked at Marissa, I realized that in this moment, I had found something even more important than understanding. I had found connection. The same connection that I had felt on the other side. It was here, too. The love, the support, the shared journey. Maybe this was the gift, the unseen gift, of my near-death experience. The reminder that no matter how far I had traveled, no matter how much I had changed, I was still part of something larger. And so was she. Days passed, and although I was still wrestling with the overwhelming confusion of my new reality, something inside me began to shift. It wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't a moment of sudden clarity or a dramatic epiphany. But slowly, bit by bit, I started to see the world differently. The way I viewed Marissa, the way I saw my children and my friends, it all started to change. It felt as though I was waking up from a long, deep sleep, as though the fog that had clouded my perception of life was beginning to clear. It wasn't easy. The contrast between the serene world I had experienced during my near-death experience and the chaotic, noisy world I had returned to felt jarring at times. It was as if I were trying to step into a familiar pair of shoes that no longer fit. The old James, the one who used to laugh at the trivialities of life, the one who got caught up in small worries and petty arguments, felt like a stranger. He didn't seem like someone I knew anymore. I found myself drawn to moments of stillness. Quiet mornings, when the world was still and the air was cool with the promise of a new day, became my sanctuary. I would sit in the garden, feeling the weight of the sunlight on my skin, watching the leaves rustle in the breeze. It was simple. It was ordinary. But it felt extraordinary to me now. I had seen something that transcended the ordinary, and now everything around me, the mundane acts of daily life, seemed like sacred rituals. The laughter of my children, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the warmth of Marissa's touch, it was all profound in ways I couldn't have understood before. I had experienced love in its purest form, and now I felt it in every small moment. I had spent most of my life rushing, striving for success, chasing after things that seemed important at the time but now felt so trivial. I had gotten lost in the constant pursuit of more money, more recognition, more comfort. But now, those things seemed hollow. The idea of more didn't appeal to me anymore. I had learned that the true richness of life wasn't in what we accumulated, but in the moments we lived fully, in the connections we made, and in the love we shared. It was during these quiet moments of reflection that I began to understand something important. The journey I had been through wasn't just about surviving death, it was about learning how to truly live. I began to talk more openly with Marissa. I would tell her about the strange feelings I had when I looked at the world around me, the way I felt like I was seeing things for the first time. She listened, and though she didn't fully understand, she never judged. She was patient, letting me process at my own pace, without rushing me to return to who I had been. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to her with a question that had been on my mind for a while. "Do you ever think about what happens after we die?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment, as if she were searching for the right words. "I think about it sometimes," she said, her voice soft. "I guess I always thought that we just disappear. That's it. But now, I'm not so sure. I don't know what happens after we're gone, but I've seen how it's changed you. I've seen how much more you appreciate the little things. And I think that's a gift. Whatever it is you experienced, James, it's helped you see the beauty in life, in ways you never did before." Her words struck a chord deep within me. She was right. I had spent so much time focused on the afterlife, on the grand questions about what lies beyond death, that I had overlooked the one truth that was standing right in front of me. The gift wasn't just about what I had seen on the other side. It was about how I was living now. How I was able to find peace, not just in the stillness of death, but in the quiet moments of everyday life. How I was learning to be present, to appreciate the fleeting beauty of this world. Marissa didn't need to understand every detail of my experience for me to know that she had given me something even more important. She had given me the space to heal. She had given me the freedom to embrace this new life, without judgment or fear. She had been my anchor, helping me stay grounded as I navigated this strange, new journey. As I sat there beside her, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something important. The fear of death that had once consumed me, the fear of the unknown, of what lay beyond, had faded. It wasn't gone completely, but it no longer ruled my thoughts. The truth was, I didn't need to have all the answers about life after death. What I needed to do was live fully, to embrace the moments I had left, and to share the love I had found with those around me. There were still so many questions left unanswered. I still didn't know what the afterlife truly was, or why I had been given the chance to return to this life. But the fear of death had lost its grip on me. I had learned that the value of life wasn't in its certainty or in knowing what comes next. The value was in how we live, how we love, and how we make the most of the time we have. I didn't need to search for some grand answer to make my life meaningful. The meaning was already here, in every quiet moment, in every connection with the people I loved. And as I sat there with Marissa, I realized that the most important lesson I had learned was this: life was a gift. Not just the big moments, but the small, quiet ones too. Every breath, every smile, every sunrise and sunset, they were all gifts. And I was determined to live every moment with gratitude. The mornings were easier now. Not easy, exactly, but easier. I woke up feeling lighter, as if the weight of the world wasn't pressing down on my chest as it had in those first few weeks after my return. Still, I couldn't deny the occasional flare-up of anxiety, that gnawing feeling deep in my gut that seemed to whisper, what if? What if I had made the wrong choice coming back? What if I hadn't truly seen the truth? But I was learning to let those thoughts float by, like clouds drifting across the sky. The old James had fought against them, tried to wrestle control over every thought, every emotion. But now, the new James was beginning to accept them without fear. It was as if I had seen the vastness of existence, and in comparison, my personal worries seemed so small, so temporary. I had learned that it wasn't the fear that was the problem, it was my relationship with it. The fear didn't control me anymore. It wasn't an enemy to be fought, but a part of the human experience to be accepted. I didn't have to make it go away. I just had to allow it to be there, without letting it take over my life. Marissa noticed the change in me. She saw the way I was beginning to shift, how I no longer carried the same tension in my shoulders, the same restlessness in my eyes. I think she had worried that I might never come back to her completely, that I might be lost in some realm of doubt or confusion, but slowly, she began to see that I was coming back. Not to the person I had been, but to the person I was meant to be now. One evening, after a long day of work, Marissa came home and found me sitting on the porch, gazing out over the yard. It had become my favorite place to reflect. The fading light of the sun, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, it was peaceful, grounding. "James," she said, her voice soft, as she stepped onto the porch and sat beside me, "I've been thinking." "About what?" I asked, turning to face her. She paused for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "About you. About the way you're changing. I'm starting to see you, not just as the man I married, but as someone different. Someone more at peace." I smiled faintly, grateful for her patience, her understanding. "It's strange," I said, staring down at my hands, "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to come back with so much uncertainty. But I think I've learned that it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to just be." She reached over and took my hand in hers. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you went through. What it must have felt like, seeing the other side. And I can't pretend to understand it fully, but I do know this: you've changed. You're more present. You're more here, with me, with us." I squeezed her hand, appreciating the weight of her words. "It's like I've learned to stop fighting the fear. Before, I was always so terrified of what might happen next, of losing control, of death. But now I'm starting to let go of that fear. I'm beginning to realize that I don't need to control everything. I don't need to have all the answers." Her eyes softened. "You're right. We never really know what's coming next. But the only thing we can do is live, right now, in this moment. And I'm so glad you're here with me, right now." We sat together in silence for a while, the sky turning from blue to purple as the stars began to appear. It felt right, this quiet evening, this stillness between us. I had feared that after my near-death experience, I might become disconnected from the world, from the people I loved. But instead, I was beginning to see that the experience had only deepened my connection to them. To Marissa. To the children. To life itself. As I let go of my fears and uncertainties, I also began to let go of the need to control every outcome. The sense of urgency that had once driven me to accomplish more, to be more, started to fade. I wasn't trying to hold on to life with a clenched fist anymore. Instead, I was learning to embrace it with an open hand, accepting whatever came my way, knowing that whatever happened was part of the journey. I still had moments of doubt, moments when the questions crept in: what if there's more? What if this is all a mistake? But now, those moments didn't overwhelm me. I could acknowledge them, but I didn't have to let them define me. What was the point of living in fear of something that was inevitable? Death. It was part of the cycle of life. I had been on the other side of it. I had felt what lay beyond, and I knew, whatever happened next, I would be okay. Marissa gave me a small smile as she sat next to me, the quiet evening wrapping around us like a blanket. "You've really changed, James. But I think you found something important. Something we all need to remember." "What's that?" "That life is a gift," she said simply, her voice full of warmth. "Every single moment is a gift. It's not about what comes after. It's about what we do right now. With each other. With our time. With our hearts." I nodded, the words resonating deep within me. Marissa had always known what I had struggled to learn. Life was about the moments we shared, the love we gave, and the peace we found in the present. It was a lesson that took me facing death to truly understand. And now, as I sat beside her, I knew one thing for certain: would never take life for granted again. The days blurred together, but in a way, it felt like a new chapter had begun in my life. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I was beginning to realize that I didn't have to have all the answers. The questions about what lay beyond life still lingered in my mind, but they no longer held the same grip on me. I was starting to embrace the idea that some things were meant to remain a mystery, and that was okay. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the moon rise over the trees, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I had always been a man driven by logic, by the need for certainty. But now, after everything I had been through, I found myself more comfortable with uncertainty. I didn't need to know every detail of the afterlife. I didn't need to understand it all. What mattered was how I lived today, how I embraced the present moment. I thought back to the moment when I had crossed over, when I had felt my body slipping away and the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders. That experience had shown me something I could never have learned through mere study or philosophy. It wasn't about concepts or theories, it was about feeling the connection to something greater, to a force beyond comprehension, and feeling at peace with it. In the weeks since my return, I had been trying to make sense of that experience. But now, I understood that it wasn't about making sense of it. It wasn't something that could be neatly packaged into a logical explanation. It was a feeling, a truth that couldn't be fully conveyed by words. And the more I tried to put it into words, the more I felt like I was distorting it. The truth was, there were no answers, at least not the ones I was looking for. But there was peace. A peace that had nothing to do with understanding, and everything to do with acceptance. Marissa had been my anchor through all of this. She had been the steady presence in my life, the one person who had not wavered, even when I had no idea who I was or where I was going. In so many ways, she had carried me through the darkness, even when I hadn't been able to carry myself. And now, as we moved forward, I knew that the greatest gift I could give her, and myself, was the gift of peace, the peace that comes from letting go of fear, of doubt, and of the need for control. One afternoon, we were sitting together in the living room, the soft hum of the air conditioning filling the silence between us. I turned to her, my heart full of gratitude. "Marissa," I said, my voice unsteady, "I don't know how to thank you for everything. For being here. For loving me, even when I couldn't love myself. I don't think I would have made it through this without you." She looked at me, her eyes soft, and smiled. "You don't have to thank me, James. I love you. I always will, no matter what. This has been hard, but I'm glad we're in this together." Her words were simple, but they were everything I needed to hear. The love between us was stronger now, not just because of the shared history we had, but because we had learned to embrace the unknown together. We had faced something so profound, something that could have torn us apart, but instead, it had brought us closer. As I sat there with her, I realized that there would always be moments of uncertainty in life. There would always be questions without answers. But in the space between the questions, in the quiet moments of shared understanding, there was peace. Peace in knowing that I didn't have to figure everything out. Peace in knowing that no matter what happened, I wasn't alone. "James," Marissa said, breaking my thoughts, "do you think we'll ever know the answers? About what happens after we die?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I realized that I didn't need to know. "I don't think so," I said slowly. "And that's okay. Maybe the answers aren't as important as we think. Maybe what matters is how we live, what we do with the time we have here. I think I'm finally at peace with that." Her smile was small but knowing. She didn't need me to explain further. We had both come to understand that life, in all its uncertainty, was a gift. Not because it made sense, but because we had the opportunity to live it fully, to love fully, to experience it for what it was. It was in those moments, when I could finally let go of the pressure to have it all figured out, that I began to experience true freedom. Freedom to just be. To exist. To love. The truth, I realized, wasn't something that could be contained in a neat, tidy box. It was something that was felt, something that lived within us. It was in the love I felt for Marissa, for my children, for the world around me. It was in the quiet moments of peace that settled into my soul, and it was in the understanding that even the most difficult questions were part of the human experience, and that it was okay not to have all the answers. As I sat with Marissa, watching the evening sky fade into night, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything I had. I had been given a second chance at life, and though I didn't know exactly what lay ahead, I knew I didn't have to fear it anymore. What came after wasn't as important as how I lived while I was here. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I was content. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I began to see the changes in myself more clearly. I wasn't the man I had been before my near-death experience. I had always prided myself on being practical, on being able to control my circumstances, on knowing exactly what was going to happen next. But now, all that had shifted. The tight grip I once had on the world around me was loosening, little by little. The fear that had controlled my every move, the fear of death, of the unknown, was gradually being replaced by something else. Something more peaceful. Something that felt like love. I no longer worried about achieving more, about accumulating things, or about whether I was successful in the eyes of the world. What I had learned through my experience was that what mattered most wasn't what we built for ourselves, but what we built for others. And so, I began to focus on what I could leave behind. Not in terms of material wealth, but in the love and memories I could create. Marissa and I had talked a lot about this, what it meant to live a life of purpose, to leave a legacy that mattered. But we had also spoken about how much we take for granted. We had both seen how fragile life could be, and it had made us reevaluate what we wanted our lives to stand for. The small things, the way I would hold her hand in the morning or tell her I loved her before going to bed, those were the things that really mattered. Those were the moments that would stay with us long after the big events faded away. It wasn't just about our love for each other, though. It was about the love we shared with our children, with the people who had touched our lives in ways both big and small. I had always been distant, detached in some ways, caught up in the pursuit of something I couldn't quite define. But now I understood that love was the most important thing I could leave behind. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the park with my son, Andrew. He was in his mid-30s now, with a family of his own. I had been a distant father, busy with work and caught up in the daily grind, but I had been trying to make up for lost time. We sat on a bench, watching his children play nearby. "Dad," Andrew said after a long pause, "I've been thinking a lot about what you went through. About what happened when you died." The words still felt strange to hear, even months later. But I didn't flinch anymore. Instead, I nodded and turned to him. "I know," I said quietly. "I think about it a lot, too. I've been trying to understand what it all means, you know." He looked at me, his eyes filled with both curiosity and concern. "Do you think you figured it out?" I smiled softly, my mind wandering back to that moment, floating above my body, feeling the pull of the light, the sense of peace that came over me. I shook my head. "No, I don't think I'll ever figure it out. And I think that's okay. I've realized that I don't need to have all the answers." Andrew looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as if he were processing the weight of my words. "You know," he said, "before all of this, I don't think I truly understood the importance of family. Or love. But seeing you come back, seeing the way you've changed, it's made me think about my own life. What really matters? I want to make sure I'm leaving something behind for my kids too. Something meaningful." Hearing those words from Andrew made my heart swell with pride. I had spent so many years believing that success was measured by what you could acquire, by what you could give your children in terms of money or status. But now, I understood that it wasn't about leaving them riches, it was about leaving them a legacy of love, of values, of memories that would stay with them long after I was gone. "You already are, son," I said, my voice full of emotion. "The love you give your children, the way you raise them, that's the legacy. It's more than anything you could ever buy or build. It's the most important thing. We sat in silence for a while, watching the children play. I felt a deep sense of gratitude in that moment. Not just for the time I had been given, but for the people I had in my life, for the chance to be a father, a husband, and a friend. I realized that my legacy wasn't about the things I had accomplished, it was about the love I had shared and the connections I had made along the way. Marissa and I talked a lot about this. We talked about the importance of family, of living in the present, and of making sure we left behind something that would endure. It wasn't always easy to let go of old habits, old ways of thinking, but every day felt like a step closer to the person I wanted to be, the person I was meant to be. One night, as we were sitting in the kitchen, Marissa said something that stayed with me. "You know, James, I think the thing that matters most is how we love. It's the one thing that never goes away. The love we share with each other, with our children, with the people we've touched in life, that's our legacy. That's what people remember about us." I looked at her, her face soft in the dim light of the kitchen, and nodded. "You're right. It's not about how much we have or what we achieve. It's about how much love we give and receive. That's what makes life meaningful." And as I sat there with her, I understood the truth in her words more than ever before. My near-death experience had taught me many things, but the most important lesson was this: life is fleeting, but love is eternal. The love we give, whether to our family, our friends, or even to ourselves, is what endures beyond death. It's what shapes the legacy we leave behind. And I had come to realize that this was the greatest gift of all. The quiet moments were becoming more frequent. Days that once seemed endless and filled with tasks now felt like precious gifts, each one more valuable than the last. I had become someone different, someone softer, more present, more willing to embrace the unknown. The lessons I had learned from my near-death experience had not been easy, but they had transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. As I sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that my greatest gift was not the second chance at life, but the ability to truly live. Marissa and I were sitting on the porch again, just as we had countless times before, but this time it felt different. We had settled into a rhythm, a way of being together that was comfortable and peaceful. The silence between us no longer felt heavy or awkward, it was simply the space where love could grow. "I've been thinking a lot lately," I said, breaking the silence. "About everything we've been through. About the life I had before. And the life I have now." Marissa turned to me, her eyes soft and understanding. "What's on your mind?" I paused for a moment, trying to put into words what had been swirling inside me for so long. I used to be so focused on everything I hadn't done, everything I thought I needed to accomplish. I was always chasing something, but I never really stopped to appreciate what I already had. The love, the family, the quiet moments like this one. It's as if I was waiting for something big to happen, something to make my life meaningful. But now, I realize, it was always here. It was in every moment we've shared, in every day we've lived. Marissa smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. She had always been the more grounded one, the one who understood the importance of presence, of living in the now. "James, I think you've finally figured it out," she said softly. "The meaning of life isn't found in the big things we do, but in the small moments we experience. It's in the love we share, the time we spend with each other, the way we appreciate the life we have right now." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. She was right. I had spent so much of my life waiting for some grand revelation, some moment of clarity, but I now understood that the clarity was already here. It was in the warmth of her hand in mine, in the laughter of our children, in the simplicity of being together. It was in the present moment, the only one we truly had. We had both changed, of course, but the change wasn't about becoming someone else, it was about becoming more of who we were meant to be. We had learned to let go of the past, to stop worrying about what might happen in the future, and to simply enjoy the gift of now. Do you think people ever really understand that? I asked, my voice filled with curiosity. Marissa thought for a moment before answering. I think some people do. But not everyone. There are so many distractions in life, so many things that pull us away from what really matters. But I think you're starting to see it now. And that's the gift. The ability to live fully, without regret, without fear. To embrace the now. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything Marissa had taught me, not just in the months after my return, but throughout our entire life together. She had always been my grounding force, the one who reminded me of what truly mattered, even when I was too lost in my own head to see it. The years ahead felt less daunting now. I didn't know how much time I had left, and honestly, I didn't need to know. All I knew was that I wanted to make the most of every day. I wanted to live fully, to love fully, and to appreciate every moment I had. The fear of death that once haunted me no longer held its power over me. I had come to understand that death was simply another part of the cycle, another phase in the journey. I didn't know what lay on the other side, but I had seen enough to know that whatever it wasn't something to fear. It was just another transition. And no matter what happened, I knew I would be okay. It was a profound shift in my thinking. I had spent so much time focusing on what I couldn't control, what I didn't know, what I couldn't see. But now, I understood that the only thing I could control was how I lived. And that, in itself, was enough. Marissa squeezed my hand, pulling me out of my thoughts. James, she said gently, we've been given something very special, haven't we? I looked at her, my heart full of love. We have. And I'll never take it for granted again. We sat there for a while, watching the sky turn darker, the stars beginning to appear one by one. It was one of those peaceful evenings where everything felt right, where the world seemed to slow down and allow you to catch your breath. As I sat there with Marissa, I realized that the greatest gift life could offer wasn't something I had to chase or strive for. It was already here, in the love I had, in the connections I made, and in the simple, quiet moments that filled the space between each breath. And as I let the peace of the moment settle into my soul, I knew one thing for sure, I had learned to live. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?